Imagine a world where the map is fully colored in, where every mountain has been scanned by satellites and every valley tracked by GPS. We live in an age of total visibility, a bright and sterile era where the monsters of our ancestors have been chased into the light. Yet, in the quiet corners of our collective psyche, a shadow still moves. A massive, hairy figure that refuses to be categorized or captured. This is the legend of the Bigfoot, the Sasquatch, or the Yeti, a creature that exists in the tension between folklore and the fossil record. What if the most enduring mystery of the natural world isn't about a monster at all, but about our own deep-seated need for the wild? For centuries, across disconnected cultures and vast oceans, stories of wild men have emerged with startlingly similar physical and behavioral characteristics. From the high Himalayas to the dense temperate rainforests of the Pacific Northwest, the descriptions remain consistent: tall, bipedal, and covered in thick fur. Indigenous oral traditions, such as those of the Coast Salish people, speak of Saskets, a spiritual and physical guardian of the deep woods. These are not just campfire stories, they are cultural archives that suggest a persistent coexistence with something we have yet to officially name. Why does this mystery exist in an era where we can count the stripes on a tiger from 1,000 miles above the Earth? Perhaps it is because the wilderness is not as empty as our maps suggest, and the unexplored is more of a state of mind. The human brain is a master of pattern recognition, evolved over millions of years to spot a predator hiding in the dappled forest light. We are biologically programmed to see faces in the leaves and giants in the shadows, a survival mechanism that occasionally misfires in the modern world. But psychology only explains the why of the belief, not the what of the physical evidence that has accumulated over decades. In 1967, at Bluff Creek, California, two men captured a few seconds of grainy 16mm film that would change the mystery forever. The Patterson-Gimlin film depicts a large, muscular figure walking with a distinctive, heavy gait, a sequence that has been stabilized and debated for 50 years. Biomechanists and Hollywood creature designers have scrutinized every frame, looking for the telltale signs of a zipper or the sway of a costume. While skeptics see a man in a suit, some researchers point to the fluid movement of muscles and the compliant gait as evidence of something biological. Beyond the film, there are the footprints, thousands of plaster casts of giant, five-toed tracks found in some of the most remote regions on Earth. Many are obvious hoaxes, carved from wood or stamped into the mud, but a small percentage bear the microscopic details of real anatomy. If these creatures are real, science demands they occupy a branch on the tree of life, a biological lineage with a history. One of the most compelling candidates is Gigantopithecus blacki, an enormous ape that lived in Southeast Asia until about 300,000 years ago. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, Gigantopithecus was a real-life giant, though most researchers believe it was a distant cousin of the orangutan. Conventional wisdom says they went extinct as the climate changed, but cryptozoologists wonder if a small population could have migrated and survived. Could a relic population have crossed the Bering Land Bridge into the Americas, mirroring the journey of early humans and megafauna? To answer this, modern science doesn't just look for blurry photos. It looks for the invisible smoke left behind by all living things: DNA. Environmental DNA, or eDNA, allows scientists to sequence the genetic material found in soil, water, and even the very air of the forest. In 2014, geneticist Brian Sykes from the University of Oxford conducted a systematic DNA analysis of dozens of hair samples attributed to anomalous primates. The results were a cold shower for enthusiasts. Most samples belonged to bears, cows, horses, and in one case, a very hairy human. Interestingly, 2 samples from the Himalayas matched a prehistoric polar bear, suggesting a possible unknown subspecies, but not a primate. This highlights the mistaken identity theory, where a bear standing on its hind legs in the fog becomes a legendary monster in the blink of an eye. In the dense brush, our eyes often fail us, but the laws of ecology and population biology are much harder to cheat. For a species to survive for thousands of years, it needs a minimum viable population, enough individuals to avoid the genetic dead end of inbreeding. A population of thousands of large primates would require a massive amount of food and leave behind a significant ecological footprint. We should see feeding signs, territorial markings, and most importantly, biological remains like bones or teeth that haven't turned to dust. Yet the forest floor is a busy place. Scavengers and acidic soil can recycle a carcass into nothingness in a matter of weeks. Still, the lack of a body on a slab remains the strongest argument against the existence of a giant undiscovered North American ape. Science is a process of elimination. And as we tick off the boxes, the space where Bigfoot can hide becomes smaller and smaller. But as the physical evidence thins out, the mystery shifts from the woods into the complex machinery of the human mind. Why are we so desperate to find a cousin in the dark? And what happens to our world when there are no mysteries left? To understand the persistent ghost of the Sasquatch, we must look at the landscape through the eyes of a different kind of researcher, the ecologist. A 2009 study used ecological niche modeling to map out where a Bigfoot could theoretically survive based on climate and food availability. The map generated was a near-perfect overlay of the sightings reported by enthusiasts, suggesting a species well adapted to the temperate rainforest. However, when the researchers overlaid the same model with the habitat of the American black bear, the maps were virtually identical. This suggests that what we interpret as a mysterious primate might simply be the ecological signature of a well-known neighbor. If Bigfoot is an animal, it must follow the rules of thermodynamics, it must eat, it must move, and it must eventually die. But the evidence often behaves less like a biological organism and more like a phantom, appearing and disappearing without leaving a trail. This led some to propose the interdimensional hypothesis, suggesting the creature slips between realities, though science finds no basis for such claims. Back in the realm of the tangible, we find the Ape Canyon incident of 1924, where miners claimed their cabin was besieged by mountain devils. They described large rocks being hurled at their roof by unseen giants, a story that sparked decades of local fascination and fear. Decades later, a group of hikers suggested the giants might have been local youths playing a prank or perhaps just falling rocks from a cliff. Pranks and hoaxes are a major contaminant in the data pool, often motivated by fame, money, or the simple joy of trickery. Ray Wallace, a logging contractor, was revealed after his death to have used wooden feet to create hundreds of fake tracks for decades. These hoaxes don't just muddy the waters, they create a feedback loop, where the myth feeds the evidence, which in turn feeds the myth. Yet, even when we strip away the fakes, a core of unexplained encounters remains stories from credible witnesses who have nothing to gain. Search and rescue officers and veteran woodsmen often tell of a specific, oppressive silence that falls over the forest before a sighting. This is known as the Oz effect, a psychological state where the environment feels frozen as if the observer has stepped out of time. Is this a reaction to a real, terrifying predator? Or is it the brain's response to an overwhelming sense of isolation? We are social creatures, and when we are truly alone in the vastness of nature, our minds may populate the void with familiar shapes. The wild man is a mirror we hold up to the forest, a reflection of our ancient ancestors and our fear of being replaced. If we want to find a real giant, we must look beyond North America to the highest, most isolated terrain on our planet, the Himalayas. Here, the legend of the Yeti, the abominable snowman, has been part of Sherpa culture for generations, long before Westerners arrived. In 1951, explorer Eric Shipton photographed a massive, clear footprint in the snow, reigniting a global obsession with the wild man of the snows. Unlike the forest-dwelling Sasquatch, the Yeti is often described as a guardian of the high passes, a creature of the thin, cold air. Science stepped in again, this time with the help of high-altitude logistics and international collaboration to solve the Himalayan mystery. Researchers gathered biological artifacts from local monasteries, including Yeti, scalps, and hand bones kept as sacred religious relics. When modern DNA sequencing was applied to these artifacts, the results were definitive. They were made from the hides of local bears and goats. Specifically, the Tibetan brown bear, the Himalayan brown bear, and the Asian black bear were the true owners of the Yeti identity. To the locals, these bears are often seen as spiritual beings, and the line between the physical animal and the legend is intentionally blurred. But there is another contender in the annals of hidden megafauna, one that takes us to the steaming jungles of the Amazon, the Mapinguari. Described as a giant, reddish-haired beast with a mouth in its belly and a stench so foul it can knock a hunter unconscious. While the belly mouth is likely a cultural metaphor, the physical description matches a creature that officially died out 10,000 years ago. Megatherium, the giant ground sloth, was a 6-ton titan that could stand on its hind legs and pull down tree branches with massive claws. Paleontologists like Dr. David Oren have spent years investigating whether a small population of these sloths could have survived in the deep Amazon. The stench described by witnesses could be a real biological trait, the scent glands of a large unknown mammal marking its territory. Fossil evidence shows that humans and giant ground sloths definitely overlapped at the end of the last ice age, engaging in epic hunts. Is it possible that the mapinguari isn't a living animal, but a cultural fossil, a memory passed down through 400 generations of oral history? This phenomenon, where ancient history is preserved in myth, is a powerful reminder of how long the human story truly is. We carry the ghosts of the megafauna we once hunted in our stories, keeping them alive long after their bones have turned to stone. Whether it's a sloth in the jungle or an ape in the pines, we are obsessed with the idea of a survivor from a lost world. As our scientific tools become sharper, the shadows where these giants might hide are retreating into the most extreme environments on Earth. We are currently living through the 6th mass extinction, a period where we are losing species faster than we can catalogue them. It is a profound irony that we search so desperately for a mythical giant while thousands of real, documented species vanish in silence. Biologists estimate that over 80% of species on Earth, mostly insects and fungi, remain undiscovered by modern science. If a massive primate can remain hidden, it suggests a failure of our technology, but also a testament to the resilience of the natural world. We must consider the Lazarus effect, where species thought to be extinct for millions of years suddenly reappear in the modern day. The coelacanth, a prehistoric fish believed to have died out with the dinosaurs, was found swimming off the coast of South Africa in 1938. If a large fish can hide in the vastness of the deep ocean, why couldn't a giant ape hide in the 5 million square kilometers of the Amazon? The difference lies in the medium. The ocean is a 3-dimensional abyss of darkness, while the land is under constant surveillance from above. Yet, even with our satellites, we frequently find lost worlds, such as the Mount Lico rainforest in Mozambique, discovered via Google Earth. In 2018, scientists scaled a 700-meter cliff to find a hidden ecosystem that had been isolated from the rest of the world for millennia. These discoveries give us hope that the world is still bigger than our understanding of it, that there are still secrets worth finding. But the search for Bigfoot or the Yeti isn't just a biological quest. It is a deeply psychological one rooted in our evolutionary past. For most of human history, we were not the undisputed masters of the planet. We were prey, sharing the dark with much larger things. Our ancestors lived in a world of giants, mammoths, saber-toothed cats, and enormous bears that occupied the same caves we sought for shelter. This ancestral fear remains hardwired into our amygdala, the part of the brain that processes threats before we even realize what we're seeing. When we see a Bigfoot in the woods, we might be experiencing a ghost circuit in our brain, an ancient alarm bell ringing for a predator that is no longer there. We are a species that conquered the world by being observant, and the wild man is the ultimate test of our ability to perceive reality. In the absence of real monsters, we have become the monsters ourselves, changing the climate and the landscape at an unprecedented scale. Perhaps we keep the legend of the Sasquatch alive because we aren't ready to be the only ones left in the house. As we reach the final edges of our map, we find that the true value of Bigfoot isn't in its physical discovery, but in the humility it forces upon us. It represents the known unknown, a placeholder for the parts of the natural world that still refuse to be tamed, measured, or sold. If we were to find a body tomorrow, the mystery would die, replaced by a Latin name, a conservation plan, and a cage. By remaining hidden, the creature protects the forest, acting as a mythological shield for the ecosystems we have yet to destroy. This is the philosophy of rewilding the mind, allowing ourselves to believe that the Earth is still vast enough to keep a secret. We are the first species to have the power to delete the wild entirely, to replace the complex chaos of nature with the orderly lines of civilization. But a world without monsters is a world where we are truly alone, trapped in a mirror-walled room of our own construction. Science tells us that Bigfoot is highly unlikely, that the evidence is thin, and that the laws of biology are stubborn and unforgiving. Yet, the same science tells us that the universe is stranger than we can imagine, with hidden dimensions and life that defies our definitions. Perhaps the Sasquatch is a bridge between these two truths, the concrete reality of the lab and the infinite possibility of the unknown. In the end, it doesn't matter if the hair sample is from a bear or if the footprint was carved from a block of cedar. What matters is that we still look into the trees and wonder, that our hearts still beat a little faster when the forest goes silent. This curiosity is the same engine that drives us to explore the stars and to dive into the deepest trenches of the sea. We are a species of seekers, and we need a horizon that doesn't end, a mystery that doesn't yield to a simple search result. The legend of the hidden giants reminds us that we are part of a much older, much larger story than our modern lives suggest. So, we will keep our cameras ready and our ears tuned to the wind, not because we expect to find a monster, but because we hope to. As long as there is a shadow in the woods that we cannot explain, the world remains a place of wonder and potential. We will leave the final box on our checklist empty, a silent tribute to the things that prefer to live in the light of our imagination. Because in a universe of infinite information, the most precious thing we can have is something we don't yet understand. What else is out there, waiting in the silence of the deep woods? And are we truly ready to find it?